The scariest stories are the ones that are true.
1. A perfect circle. My pops and I are avid campers, not professionals anymore, but my dad used to be a wilderness guide for kids. We typically prefer the eastern and western Sierras as they have great car camping spots next to lakes and a lot of great trails. Last summer we decided to go up for a 2-night stay and do some day hiking. The campground was pretty full, not unusual for the summer, but we were lucky enough, I thought at the time, to find a pretty secluded site and we set up our tents. First night was normal. Little bear activity, but we're used to that. Second night, I crawl into my backpacking tent, head and toes hit both ends very small, and I pass out cold. Until about 3 a.m. when I wake up to the sound of footsteps. My dad is a diabetic and needs to get up to pee around 3-4 times a night, and the sounds are definitely footprints, but they're coming from the wrong direction. We were located next to the bathrooms, so the footsteps should be moving in that direction, but they're coming closer to my tent. They stop about a yard short and the breathing gets really heavy. I first brush it off as my dad, maybe lost without a flashlight. The breathing goes away. I fall back asleep only to be woken a few minutes later to breathing right above the tent. You know that rush of terror up your spine? I had that. This wasn't dead. I laid perfectly still, but the footprints continued to circle the tent. I had the rain fly on so I couldn't see through the roof, and it was a new moon and pitch black. Now I convince myself, a heavy sleeper, that I'm dreaming. Just as that thought runs through my head, I feel a single finger run the length of my foot through the tent. Real slow and methodical. Now, I figure, I have to be dreaming because my foot is in my sleeping bag and I couldn't possibly feel that. But that comfort disappeared quickly when I realized, using the small ambient light available, that my foot was bare and out of the bag. I laid frozen as whatever it was. Stroked my foot for a minute or two, gave a few more labored breaths, and then just stood above my tent for what felt like an eternity before disappearing. I stayed up all night. In the morning I heard my dad get out of his tent. I bolted up and met him by the fire. He looked me in the eye and asked if I had gotten up the night before. I asked him the same and he said he had at around 2 a.m. because he thought someone was going through our stuff. As I told him my story, we noticed our gear had been neatly rearranged on the table. Every item. Nothing taken. Footprints in a perfect circle around my tent. We still can't even talk about it. 2. The Stick Men. 6 hours walk through thick brush to the nearest passable road. Age 14, maybe 15. Hiking and camping with 2 fellow Boy Scouts and an adult. We made camp for the night, had a cold dinner because it was too wet to scavenge firewood, and all turned in early. Even in the woods, there are noises. Frogs, owls, small game, and every sort of bug. My tent mate and I awoke at the same time, maybe 3 a.m., to hear nothing outside. Absolute ear-straining silence, like a woolen blanket wrapped around the head. After a few minutes, the bugs started chirping again and we went back to sleep. When we woke up in the morning, we found that 5 of the pine trees surrounding our little clearing had been connected in a star shape with scraped lines, and pinned to each one was a stick man. Like the ones from the Blair Witch. The leader and his son, occupants of the other tent, accused us of fucking with them, but we both knew it wasn't us. That's a story nobody believes. I mean, who would believe the alibis of 2 kids? I'll never camp without the safety of a large group and nearby civilization ever again. 3. The land remembers. One night I was camping near where an old river dam had been. I pulled the canoe in late, so I just draped the tarp over the canoe and crawled in underneath it and fell asleep. In the middle of the night I woke up to the sound of roaring water. I crawled up out from under the tarp and the sound stopped. I thought I must have been imagining it, or it was the wind through the trees or something. I crawled back under the tarp and the sound started again. This time when I crawled out it didn't stop. The sound got louder and louder. I realized that it sounded like water ripping through the woods. Even the dogs had their hair on end. I quickly pulled the tarp off the canoe and dragged it up to the top of a ridge and waited to see what was making that noise. Then I heard the voices, men yelling and a doll-thumping noise. I huddled down next to the boat, pulled the dogs close and waited for the sun to come up to find out what was happening. Morning came and there was nothing to see. To this day I don't know what that was, but I have my ideas. I will not camp there ever again. I was told that the land remembers, and that's fine. I just don't need to be there when it's remembering. 4. The Skin Changer, wildland firefighter with the Forest Service. Not my story, but from an old supervisor of mine that I believe completely. Setting is 2004 or so, Hells Canyon area of Middle Idaho. His crew had been working all day on an emerging incident and were going to be working through the night as well. Being the assistant superintendent of the crew, second in charge, effectively, he was out ahead scouting on an ATV or some such. He was working his way down a logging road that clearly had not been used in some time when a bobcat or lynx, it's been a few years since I heard it, appears in the middle of the road, but doesn't run away as they usually would. Thing stands there for a good 10 seconds, screams at him, and scampers up a tree not 5 feet off the road. He finds this odd but not particularly unsettling. Just a half mile or so down the road, he finds a small cabin. Also odd, as this is federal land and no private structures should be there. Upon investigation, all the windows had been boarded shut tight and someone had done a good job of doing so. The door had been punched out and secured to a hole drilled into the log frame by a chain. Someone did not want anything getting in, or out. Peering through the hole in the door, he can see that everything in the house is upset. This has him kind of unsettled. So he hops on his ATV and heads back up the road. Well, here's where it gets real interesting. Right where the bobcat had been, there stands a Native American woman, in a badly tattered nightgown and bare feet. Just standing there. He yells at her, asking if she needs help. She just screamed at him, the same scream as the cat from before, and climbs right up the tree, faster than any human has a right to be climbing. Obviously, he nopes out of there as fast as he can. Unsure of who or what he just saw, he asks a local guy about the cabin. After asking around a little, a local Native American hears them talking and informs them that they saw a pumaha, excuse the likely butchered spelling, in effect, a skin changer, a warg. Now, I would not believe most people that tried to tell me that. But this was a serious man that did not mess around about many things. He was dead serious the 2 times I heard him tell it, and I 100% believe he saw what he saw.